Right into a video. Yeah, this is going to be about magical thinking. And it's just going to be a long narration of my thoughts as I read through the lunar mansions for the first time. And some things you're going to hear are going to sound different from what you may have heard before. So this is Exploring Lunar Mansions. Oh my God, don't you hate when that happens? Oh, that's so insulting. With me. Okay. So I didn't get very far before I was like, okay, I have to make a video because, excuse me, there are some thoughts that I'm having that I should probably be saying out loud. Might be useful to someone for me to say out loud. And so we're looking at this link, medievalastrologyguide.com, the mansions of the moon. I thought it's been pretty good so far. I got through the first 5 mansions and we're going to go through it together. The screen is showing the actual site and some text for people who may not be looking, and you guys can screenshot if you will, but I'm not doing nothing fancy. I'm going to scroll through this and talk. Yeah. The first mansion, the budding indicator star, share some influences. Take medicine, begin a journey, purchase livestock, create discord between individuals, and imprisonment. Not good for marriage, partnerships, or the foundation of a meaningful friendship or alliance, as one individual usually tries to overpower the other. So, from this mansion, it looks like the first 12 degrees of Aries are extremely individualistic and like tense, or like there's like a lot of tension at the beginning of this constellation. When the energies come through here, at least for the moon, maybe the mansions don't apply through all the planets, but this is really definitive of the first 12 degrees of Aries. So that first decan is good for beginning journeys, but not good for relationships and foundations. It's about you. This is about the, the single individual person, and the individual usually tries to overpower the other. It's about it's about the dominating energy of a person. So when we come into the Aries energy, newborn, headstrong, rebirth, you know, it's about us. It's about our journey. It's about healing ourselves, taking medicine, beginning our journey. So as that new person, as that fresh reborn persona, purchasing livestock. So there's already some resource gathering happening here, creating discord between individuals. So the discord between individuals is not necessarily a bad thing because making it's defining each part even further. So that's what the first decan of Aries is. It's that pressure to define and separate all of the parts from the whole. And so it's not good for partnership because it wants that naturally the pressure that's building and the tension at the beginning of Aries is creating that singularity basically for the individual to be born through and like manifest themselves. Interesting. The second mansion, good for planting and journeys, but bad for marriages and employment. So after purchasing livestock, apparently it's good for planting. It's good to plant only after you purchase livestock. So you need primal materials before you begin the idea sometimes. Sometimes you need the stuff before it dawns on you what to do with the stuff. And I say this because I'm having like this visual because um, if you've read Girl Boss, originally wasn't she like in the thrift stores and she had a bunch of clothes already and then she started doing it more and more? Like you really do have to look what's around you and what's around you already has to be present in order for you to be inspired by things. That's what I think this is like leading into. Bad for marriages and employment. So Aries is just bad for partnerships so far. um Bad for marriages and employment or purchasing slaves. Oh wow. um a crowned king is the talismanic image for this second part. And I think the emperor is Aries, is ruled by Aries in the tarot. So this second decan of Aries, after one is born or rebirthed as the individual, and they're like separated from the whole, and they're like defined within another personality, they purchase some livestock, you know. It looks like that's when you have to crown yourself. So once you are reborn, once you know who you are, once you decidedly, decided upon your persona, crown yourself. Crowning yourself comes second to knowing yourself. You are supposed to be anointing yourself, planting your seeds and journeys, and not worrying about other people at first, apparently, and not worrying about the acquirement of like labor or like people to be responsible for, or like this is not where you're the king of wands yet. It's like the emperor, like you're the like master of your own life type thing, but there's nobody else in that picture yet. So you're not responsible for anything yet except for you and your livestock and the things that you're planting. The third mansion. And this is like good for people who probably want to remember them. If you like to talk through stuff and you want to go to the link and read through with me and then like make your notes, like if this is your serious study. Making up stories behind stuff is good. So like you could hear my story, be like, F what she's saying, and then make your own, and then you'll remember the cycle, like through the cycle better. The third mansion. This is interesting to me because with the decans, which I think is more so, no, I don't actually am not, I think I want to say Babylonian astrology. There is a certain period of astrology and a certain people that are responsible for splitting it into decans. I'm not sure if what it is. I don't want to butcher it, but it was interesting to me that it looks like every 12 degrees. It is what the Vedic astrology goes by, which lunar mansions I believe belong to Vedic astrology. It's interesting to me that it goes by 12 degrees each mansion, because then there's this bridge between Aries and Taurus, this nice even looking bridge between these two things. um, this straddling that's happening is, I'm intrigued by this because it's in anticipation of what is natural or should be naturally happening in every chart, which it doesn't. There are interceptions of houses and zodiac signs, but the houses each are supposed to have one zodiac ruler and then another energy that takes over that house and then leads into ruling the next house. And by having these 12-degree measurements, there's this bridge between Aries and Taurus, which indicates that the transition is acknowledged, that the transition is a period in and of itself with its own energy, rather than the decans, which are more purist, which are more pure. So this is acknowledging that there's a little bit of Aries at the beginning of every Taurus, is what I'm saying. Okay. Good to purchase animals, travel, but not by sea, which is interesting because Aries is fire and Taurus is earth. So I wonder if that's going to be a theme when we do this bridging between elements. If there's going to be exclusions of the opposite for the leading element. So we're not, water is the opposite of fire, and we're transitioning from fire to earth, and traveling by land but not by sea is preferable during this time. That's just an interesting note. Also, probably meaning that you wouldn't want to be scrying at this time. This is probably not the strongest time in the moon in the moon cycle to scry or use Neptunian illusory magic. I'll just go ahead and say things like that until I'm not allowed to say them anymore. Hunting alchemical works and doing good. Okay, so doing good is also favorable at the beginning of any Taurus transit. You want to be doing good deeds, I think. Alchemical works, transforming that identity, that raw energy, that tension into something useful. Good to purchase animals, travel. Bad for marriage partnerships between unequals and planting. And I found it interesting that even transitioning into Taurus, it says bad for marriage partnerships and planting, but it because Taurus is ruled by Venus, but so is Libra. But Libra is the sign for like marriage and partnership and stuff, which is opposite Aries. And it goes to show that Taurus, while Venusian is for the maidens, whereas Libra is more so for the marriage, which eventually leads to the mother stage of the woman's like cycle, so of life, maiden, mother, crone. A seated woman with her right hand above her head is the talismanic image. And the properties is the acquisition of all good things, safe travel, success in hunting, and alchemical experiments. So journeys are really stressed at the beginning of the cycle here. It's good to do all your traveling and gathering of information at in this part of the cycle, Aries and Aries leading into Taurus apparently. It's good to take time for yourself. I'm seeing it keeps saying it's bad for marriage, bad for partnerships. This could possibly be the time where people most likely get into the most arguments or have the most tension with their partners and don't notice it because they're not paying attention to the moon cycle, which is literally, there are times that are good for partnership and there are times that are good for solitude and taking time for yourself and traveling by yourself. So taking that night drive or like doing whatever like is good for you and taking your own journey into self. Everybody's journeys is going to look different too. It's not like about air travel, sea travel, earth travel. It's about your astral travel, about your journey into self, about the elements that you incorporate into that practice and that ritualistic, like zone. Let's see. Lunar Mansion 4. Taurus. Now we're fully into Taurus. And this is like the mid Taurus. So this is like what I'm going to call pure Taurus energy here. Good for employing others, building, investing, and obtaining offices. Okay, so now it's good to employ others. So you have to get yourself set up first. So there's teams, but it's crazy because it's like the team, like there are teams that are born, but it just shows that your process always has to start with the building of self and then the acquirement of assets in order to like gain enough gravity and enough momentum to actually have others be depending on you. Employing others, building, investing, and obtaining offices. And you have to do some planting first. You have to plant some seeds first. You have to plant some ideas first in order to get people on board. That's just the order of things. It's still bad for marriage. It's not a good time to include other people. So I highly recommend that in the air, like when the moon is in Aries, like take note of that and go into your deepest form of solitude and just slowly come out. A knight riding a horse and holding a serpent in his right hand. I'm sure there's tons of imagery that I'm missing because I'm looking at this with like very shallow eyes, but I think that this is going to be cool to look back at later and realize how much more I know about all of these, like all of the symbolism in these images. Good for employing others, building, investing, traveling, difficult and potentially dangerous. So that is cool. This is interesting because Taurus. We're in the middle of Taurus. Taurus is I'm not going to go into the cardinal fixed mutable. I'm not fluid enough in that. But what I'm saying is that basically the earth sign has solidified, right? So without the heat and fiery contribution of Aries, think about what earth and fire make, right? What comes to my mind is lava. Earth and fire make lava. Hold on, let me see. Just for the visuals of the thing. Let's look at some lava. Just so that they can't be like, you didn't do anything during the video. I did do stuff in the video. I looked stuff up like I would normally. You guys like, okay. Earth and fire make lava. Look at this. Look at this video. This is Earth. Ooh, this is Earth and fire. That was like really loud. This is earth and fire together. They make lava, so everything is moving. You could say that this is a journey in and of itself because of the traveling and the flowing. It's its own thing. It's its own, lava is like its own mixture, like element. Then when it gets to the fourth mansion, and four is also the numerological the numerological meaning of the number 4 is foundations. So it kind of makes sense that mid-Taurus energy is when things would solidify. So now it's no longer good to travel, right? It's no longer good to journey anymore. Now you're responsible for things. Not necessarily partnership, but when you're employing others and building and investing, you're not moving around, at least originally. I would argue that somewhere in here, somewhere in there, because we're transitioning to the age of Aquarius, that the principle or the physics of manifestation or the cycles of things are changing. So perhaps while you are investing in building and obtaining offices, perhaps in the age of Aquarius, traveling is preferred, but I'm not sure. It wouldn't change the nature of Taurus. It would just change the nature of when this would happen in the cycle. If that makes sense. I'll make more video. Anyway, traveling is difficult and potentially dangerous. It's hard to move around when the earth solidifies like this in the middle of Taurus. The knight riding a horse is very grounded. All of the knights ride horses, but the knight riding a horse in the earth element is the Knight of Pentacles. And he's the slowest mover. So if you are moving at this time, it's good to move slowly. It's good to have discernment. So the serpent too, that imagery right there, perhaps it is about molting and like after the molting. Now you are the snake after it's molted. Now you are transformed, because snakes are symbols of transformation. I'm not sure. Red myrrh and storax. I'm not sure. I'm skipping the notes that the author wrote, but they're pretty interesting if you want to pause and read and take screenshots. The fifth mansion. Good for marriage, education, making medicine, travel, employment, building, getting your hair cut, and washing your hair. Bad for business partnerships. This is the transition from Taurus to Gemini. So transitions from Earth to air are apparently bad for business partnerships. Because that which is solid can just like poof, perhaps. Like the transition from fire to earth, because once lava cools, it turns very hard. It solidifies. It's good leading up to it. But you don't want to make business partnerships after things have solidified from that original, building and acquiring employees and stuff. Because possibly this is the time that everything, not possibly, but it looks like this is the time that everything picks up in speed. The wind, comes. And so I think of like a dust storm, or like, yeah, windstorm, or like a tornado, more like a tornado. Good for marriage, education, making medicine, travel, employment. I would think traveling and traveling short distance because of the Gemini piece of it. And then once you get around to the Sagittarius house mansions, sorry, once you get around to the Sagittarius mansion, then it's like long distance travel. Good for marriage, education, bad for business partnerships, washing your hair, getting your hair cut. I find it interesting that these things have to do with your head and Gemini has to do with the mind. Your hair is an extension of your nervous system. The hairs on the back of your neck stand up in response to certain stimuli and signal things to your brain, and your hair is like one very, very large, more complex system for those things, for that kind of for like sending and receiving information. And like if the little hairs on the back of your neck can give you that much information in a room or about a situation or have a feeling or responses in your mind, then the hair on your head, it does much more than that. So that's interesting. Washing your hair, getting your mind clear, getting your thoughts in order is good. A head without a body. Oh my gosh, I didn't even see that part. I'm just like reading through this for the first time. This is why I thought it would be interesting. More contemporary artists have depicted it as a crown to differentiate from the decapitated head that is the image of Al Ghul. That's probably wise. Assistance in learning, revelations in dream, and favors from superiors. Interesting. The higher ups. Higher ups. So from earth to air. Very interesting. Assistance in learning. So it's good to start reading. It's good to read up on stuff during this time in the cycle. So getting a new book or starting a new book or reading multiple books for a few minutes at a time. It's good to consume information and do research at this time. The sixth mansion. Good for actions of war and seeking justice, travel, forming partnerships, and hunting. Bad for planting and agricultural work, borrowing money, or depositing something for safekeeping. Also bad for taking medicines and treating injuries. So in the middle of Gemini, there's probably a lot of wind. I'm thinking about just being in the eye of the storm, but the storm being on either side. So like you're in the middle of like a lot of wind, like a hurricane, and there's a lot of commotion around you and a lot of air coming through. So seeking justice, travel, forming partnerships, and hunting. It's good for being on the move, and not just the move, but also for obtaining opportunities while you move. So for catching things, because the hunting, but it's bad for planting and agricultural work. And I would assume that's because of the really high vibrations of the air energy. Like uprooting things as you plant them. It's bad for planting and agricultural work because everything you plant will change. The soil is changing, very shifty at this time. Borrowing money because money is an earth element still. Money represents resources. Resources are physical, material things. Borrowing money, it's it's bad to probably borrow money because you don't know if you're gonna have it later. You might lose it because then if you borrow money at this time, it's money that is sunken, because then once you do get on your feet, everything that you get back on your feet from will have to contribute to the lifestyle that you were living before, and you won't have extra for a long time. So it's bad to borrow money during the very shifty, windy energy of the middle of Gemini. Depositing something for safekeeping, it's not safe. It's not safe because everything is shifting. It reminds me of putting things in the banks, and the banks lend out your dollar 10 times over, and your dollar is worthless. And when you save it in the bank, because they lend it out to investors, is what I heard, and apparently what they do. And that's what that reminds me of. Banks are heavy Gemini energy. Depositing something for safekeeping, also bad for taking medicines and treating injuries. I would imagine that medicines are supposed to work with the water in our bodies, and having so much air uh, could possibly weaken the system somehow. And treating injuries, which I would feel like a wound for the skin, would maybe earth, and it just doesn't agree. These things just don't agree. Two images of one person. Two images are then tied together. Cultivating love and friendship, destroying cities and fields, improving hunting, bring enemies to justice, and render medicine ineffective. Interesting. Cultivating love and friendships, destroying cities and fields, improve hunting, bring enemies to justice, and render medicine ineffective. Wow. So healing is hard to do at this time, probably because of the changeability of everything. Cultivating love and friendship. I wonder why cultivating love and friendship in the middle of Gemini. I think it's because of this mirror imagery that's happening here, that's being represented in this mansion or talked about, that occurs in this area of Gemini. It's a really great time for cultivating love and friendship because you recognize yourself in other people. And this is something that I would like to talk about more, about mirror neurons. When we talk about empathy and empaths, mirror neurons are something that people tend to overlook, and talking about when trying to back lofty spiritual claims by actual science. There are mirror neurons in all of our brains. Psychology talks about it, and the middle of Gemini, these degrees between 4 degrees Gemini and 17 degrees Gemini, remind me of the mirror neuron discussion that I have with myself often, regarding friendship and love and empathy being heavily due to some people's ability to have an increased perception of how their mirror neurons affect them, and therefore the way that their mirror neurons are reacting in the presence of another person, rather than having a sensitivity to other people. It's a heightened sensitivity of the self in that particular area of the brain, or in a certain attunement to that particular feature, if that's not the right wording. You're like attuned to that particular feature of your brain and the way that it affects you. And so everything that you're experiencing is intensified because you have a more advanced or more acute experience of this asset. Yeah, this asset within your mind. Okay. Wording that was so hard. But anyways, it's possible that the middle of Gemini, because it's the twins and it's talking about the mirror images, is good for cultivating love and friendship, because when you're going through these changing times, isn't that when you meet your best friends? Isn't that when you meet the people who are there for you in the community that supports you, and when you need community the most? When people are exchanging things and things are shifting, and people are getting rid of stuff. Um, and it's bad for borrowing money or depositing for safekeeping. So see, it's bad for saving or borrowing with the intention of giving back, but it's really probably good for giving. It's good for hunting. So it's good for people finding resources. And in the midst of this, friendship and love is cultivated. So this is also probably the reason why it's bad before this happens. Talking about partnerships and marriage. Let's see. Is it still talking about that? No. It bad for business partnerships, but good for marriage. So the time for marriage was good before this time for mirrors and friendships, forming partnerships and hunting. Okay, so let's see. from Taurus to Gemini is good for relationships becoming resourceful. This is why the house of social interaction and friends and short distance travel is directly next to the resources piece, the resources house, Taurus energy. Um, it's in here somewhere. This shift from acquiring one's own resources to then having enough to actually participate in this exchange that's happening here. Bring enemies to justice and render medicine ineffective to improve hunting. Improving hunting also talks about, so like, just like how you're cleaning out your mind, you're getting your thoughts together, getting your mind together, right? Before, when you were doing the hair cutting and hair washing. Improving hunting is about improving your own mind and also about improving your hunting strategy, which oftentimes, once you have exhausted all of your options as an individual to improve your hunting strategy, the only room or capacity you would have for growth is if you begin to then include other individuals in the plan, you know, in the play, you know, forming partnerships. And a partnership happens in the mind. I think that this is also telling that once we get into Scorpio, I wonder how it'll talk about sexual partnerships or like lovers, or if there'll be a different language used for that. But by the natural order of things, beginning at Aries, or at least post rebirth as an individual, this natural progression is showing that partnerships are formed in the mind first. So it really is about sharing mindset, sharing mentality first. Well, possibly sharing resources first, and then checking the mindset or evolving the mindset. Anyways, 7th mansion. This mansion is good for agricultural pursuits and washing or purifying the body. This is the 17 degrees Gemini to 0 degrees Cancer. Interesting. I like it. The main characteristic of this mansion appears to be one of reconciliation or renewal, as sources also indicate this mansion is good for making peace with enemies, should one choose to do so. This is good for getting an advantage on them. This may be a reference to the mansion being associated with the paw of a lion, by extension, the hand of a human. Hands can reach out in support and agreement or strike out in violence. This mansion is reportedly bad for buying property or healing the sick. It would make sense because you're not in Cancer yet. All the way through to the end of Gemini is still bad for medicine and still bad for healing, because that was what I said before. If it's bad for medicine, it means you can't heal. If this is saying, or exclusively, or rather, what is that called? Specifying. If this is specifically saying it's bad for healing the sick, I think that's still due to the air properties of this zodiac energy. And by air, I really mean like whatever frequency this is categorized as to make it an air element constellation. The expansion is good for agricultural pursuits, washing or purifying the body. So we're still doing the washing. And now we're doing some purifying of the body. So after getting our thoughts in order, washing our hair, cutting it, we're now getting to the purification of the body through the rest of Gemini. And that's very interesting because the twins, It's about the twins and the mirroring of the self. So purifying the body. I wonder which body they're talking about as well, because there's the auric and ethereal and emotional body. There are multiple different bodies. So I would imagine that also, because this is an air element sign, that when it says purifying the body or washing it, it's not just talking about your corporal form. It's talking about all of the different bodies that are linked together through the mainframe of the mind. The paw of a lion. Interesting. I think it's interesting for this to be an air element, thinking about wind, and then for them to associate it with the lion. I wonder what the stars are in the system that might be associated with this imagery. Making peace with enemies should one choose to do so. So at the beginning of Gemini, it was about bringing enemies to justice and forming partnerships. And now, through the end of Gemini, it's about making peace with enemies and possibly getting an advantage on them. So Gemini is the sign to deal with that mirror energy. And I'm thinking about enemies in the physical form, so like people, but also like bad thoughts, limiting beliefs and doubts and things, all of the spiritual or mental enemies or metaphorical enemies, bad habits, kicking bad habits to anything that the shadow self is indulgent in, and being able to really explore and excavate those things and bring them to the light, because they're more obvious because of the duality of things, the mirrors of things, the friendships and the connections that you're able to make during this time are also representative or reflective of a higher thought form or energy, um, a heightened a frequency of electric signals in the brain, like transmitting the brain, the electricity in the brain and the connections between our neurons are really firing off um, in this mansion, in this Gemini mansion, from the through 17 degrees Gemini through 0 degrees Cancer. All of Gemini really are, I'm getting that the mind is able to move so much faster because the air is like a conductor. Hold on. And we're back. Okay. Good for actions of war and seeking justice, forming partnerships and hunting. And it said two images of one person. The two images are then tied together. So these degrees. Oh, I'm all the way back in the sixth mansion. Oh yeah, I guess I could talk about it. So at the beginning, it looks like two images of one person. It's about your relationship with yourself. So it's about your light and your shadow self. And but then when you go into the seventh mansion, the talismanic image is a man clothed in robes with his hands extended as if in prayer. So it seems as though the focus shifts from the self to more so of an offering. Okay, let's look at the seventh mansion.